everybody, we're here today with another great artist and a special guest. Dr. Jonathan Crossley.
Hi.
Tell us about yourself. What do you do musically and what do you do career-wise? When did you start?
All of that. I was born in Belfast in Northern Ireland in 1976.
Okay.
And we moved to South Africa when I was like 5 or 6 years old. There was a great wave of British immigrants to South Africa, especially engineers. So my dad was an engineer, and there's a lot of engineers went over to build, and construct things over there. There was a bit of a boom, and there was a kind of a contraction in England at the time. So we went across there. I'd been, when I was really little, like 4 or 5, my earliest memories are listening to a lot of vinyls, lying on the lounge floor with some headphones on, and so I was. My dad had this diverse interest. I was listening to classical orchestral music, and then some like Kraftwerk and Tangerine Dream, electronic bands, and some Genesis, so some prog rock as well. So I remember growing up listening to that, and so I was already harassing my dad to start music.
Okay.
And when we went to South Africa, there was just a guitar. There was a guitar in the house. I always think that I'm
So did it start from you? So you were the person who wants to do music, or was it like were you being pushed by your parents?
No, it was me. It was me. It was always me. I wanted to play always, or just to really immerse myself in music. And so the guitar was there, and my dad sensibly, when we went to South Africa, he found a classical guitar teacher. And so when I was 6, crazy, but when I was 6 I started, and the guitar was bigger than me.
Wow.
There's some crazy photos from back then. I couldn't get my head over the neck of the body. So, and I had a good teacher. I had a good initial teacher, and that made a difference. All through school, I did classical grades, and then when I finished school, I went and did a first degree in classical performance. And in South Africa, where the degrees are 4 years, not 3 years, like here in the UK. So I did a 4-year honours degree in performance. But by my 4th year, I was really frustrated with the fact that I couldn't improvise. And classical musicians back then, improvisation was not part of the role. It's more integrated now. And so shortly after that, I embarked on kind of a 4 or 5 year master's period of master's study, did a master's in jazz, and then released some albums in the 2000s. And then by 2010, I'd been touring in Europe with one of my projects, like a funk jazz project, and I found myself, I was using a lot of guitar effects, and I found myself at a festival in Slovakia on a stage, and I remember realizing that I'd been on my knees for about 10 or 15 minutes. I was playing with my left hand and modulating effects with my right hand, and that led to another frustration. Like, the improvisation was the frustration that led to studying jazz, but the fiddling with effects, trying to finesse or nuance the sound, that led to then my PhD, and that was I built a mechanical exoskeleton that you wear, right? So, and it was connected to guitar, so you could use the movement in the joints and stuff to modify the effects, so I could keep playing with both hands. So that was a period of study then. And that kind of continued throughout the 2010s till now. Now I'm using quite a lot of technology in the instrument. I've got a great new guitar from a guitar maker in Ireland that solved a lot of these problems, where I can control everything, right down to I can control the lights in the studio with the guitar.
Wow.
So yeah, pretty powerful system. So my music at the moment really sits at the intersection of really what I listened to when I was little, classical music, prog rock, experimental electronic, jazz. It's all in there in this kind of soup pot of stuff. So a mix of math rock, post rock, jazz, classical, it's all in one thing. Yeah.
Interesting. What was the motivation of keep carrying on studying? Going for the bachelor, going for the master and PhD?
And MBA. It's a good question. I mean, I after my master's, I vowed not to study again, and the PhD. After the PhD, I vowed not to study again, and then did an MBA. It's more of like, explain it this way. My son, he gets frustrated with me because the way I listen to music. So I went through this period last year of listening to Anna Meredith, this kind of crossover artist, classical artist. But he says I'm obsessive. I just listened to Anna Meredith like crazy for like 3 months, over and over and over and over, to like kind of figure out what's going on a little bit. And I've tried it, then put it away. You know, so a lot of my studies were like motivated by things I couldn't do. So, you know, I couldn't improvise, and that drove me nuts. And I could see my friends improvising, people. So I thought, I want to learn to improvise. So I studied that. Then I thought, okay, this is going well. Scrap that. Now I want to be able to do this with the effects, you know.
Okay.
You know, so it's just this kind of wanting to be able to do more with the instrument or more with the guitar. Never other instruments. That's never interested me. It's like, I don't feel like I've, you know, gotten as far as I'd like, or got the guitar to be able to do exactly what I want, because interest keeps shifting.
There is something that I'm always intrigued and interested to know, because between the time that as a teenager or as a child we show interest to a lot of things, to the time that I realize this is something that I really want to do for the rest of my life, there is like a maybe few months or a few years or maybe sometimes decades of a gap. How did you realize that this is something that I really want to do? Was it something like in a specific event that happened in your life that you realized, okay, this is something that I really want to do for the rest of my life? Music is my thing.
You know that teacher that I mentioned earlier, you know, when I was 6, he used to do this thing. We were in a tiny town outside of Johannesburg in South Africa, and he used to book the little local library once a year or twice a year, and he had a bunch of students, and they'd put on these concerts. So I remember when I was 7 playing my first concert, about 200 people, and it was such a striking event. It's in my mind always. I just love that, not the performing, so not like, you know, I don't know, Beyonce or something, not that type of performance, you know, not a show.
Sure.
I love the feeling of the conversation that you have with an audience, especially an intimate one, where you play something, I don't know, you feel this energy coming from them, where they're engaged in the communication. So I fell more in love with that. You know, I always wanted to do that, and throughout my school career, there were these regular concerts, and then it moved into competitions, and so it was just this natural thing. But you know, I would be quite happy if there was a guitar kicking around now and you and I were hanging out here. I'd get out the guitar and I'd play to you, just to have that feeling, you know. So it can be one person to me.
It's like a language that you try to communicate with.
Yeah, it's like an emotional event,
of
you know.
Course,
and
it's an interaction of emotions.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
I mean, even playing, you know, if somebody was sick or not feeling well, I'll go grab the guitar. Or if it's my friend's birthday, I have a ritual of grabbing the guitar and playing and singing a really bad version of Happy Birthday each year. Just that it's just enjoyable, you know.
Of course.
So yeah, it was just always a thing that I did. The academic thing was something I fell into. It was I graduated and I needed help with something, and so that was never an intention. So I never intended to go into academia, but that was just something that occurred, and it's a great way to stay engaged with music and do experimental things.
Do you come from a musical family?
So my dad was he was in a choir, I think an amateur choir. Stand to be corrected here, but he was a singer, and we were, you know, in Northern Ireland. We were involved with the church. I grew up around church singing and that sort of thing. But not nobody else in the family is a professional musician. I did look up to my cousin, who's still in Belfast. He's a bit older than me, and I used to go visit them, and he was kind of like, I looked up to him, and he had a little recording studio, and so that got me involved in technology, you know. So there was that, but it was really in isolation. I mean, in many ways. I mean, where we were, the town where we were outside of Johannesburg, wasn't a big music community or anything. It was just kind of based around this teacher and his little teaching studio. Do
you think, does it help to have supportive family around you who are musical?
Oh, that's easy to answer, right? I mean, Jacob Collier is the perfect example. I don't know if you know his story. So I mean, his mum is, I think she's in the London Symphony Orchestra, and I think his grandfather was as well.
Yeah.
And so this, you know, so everyone's wowed by Jacob Collier, you know, and his ear and the things he can do in the multi-instrument. But I mean, the backstory is they used to sit around after dinner and take out Bach cantatas, you know, and sing it as a family. That was the after dinner activity. Now, if you do that, I mean, you get Jacob Collier. That's a recipe,
Sure.
you know, where you're exposed to that sort of thing all the time. I think if you don't have a musical family who have gone through the difficulties of learning music, then
You'll be the first one that has to go through those difficulties.
yeah. I mean, when
100%.
I was growing up, there's so many things that were missing in my tuition that I had to catch up with later.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, my son is studying music, and there's, like, for instance, oral training. You know, I never grew up, we didn't know what it was, it wasn't around. And that's what Jacob Collier's got, is this incredible ear, right?
Mm.
So my son, he's practicing guitar, but he also, I have a deal with him, he does 10 minutes of, I've got this computer program that does oral training. He has to do that every day.
Mm.
And he's now progressing faster than I did because of the ear. So that's a lesson learned on my part, passing on as an advantage to him.
Mm.
So I guess that's useful, you know.
Of course.
But if you're starting out in some isolated area with, you know, with no backing, you're really learning from scratch, and, you know, and especially pre-internet. I mean, now the internet's there, but, you know, back when I was small, there was no internet.
Sure, I agree, because as you said it, when you're exposed to those sounds, it's like a language, right?
Yeah.
When you're exposed to it, you just kind of grow into it. You don't really have to, obviously you have to down the line make conscious effort.
Yeah.
But somehow it comes to you naturally, some people would say, like talent.
Yeah.
But I would call it like privileges that people have
Yeah.
in earlier stages when they're younger.
Yeah. I mean, like, if you think, like, you know, I mean, we're obviously talking here from a Western perspective, you know, but if you think about, say, you know, the role of the guru in India, and how, like, a young musician will go and live with the guru, live with the master, and just play with them all day. I mean, that's such an advantage, you know. We don't have, because then you get the whole master-student relationship from a really, really early age. And somehow in the Western kind of nuclear family, you know, where the family is located, you just don't have that type of level of contact. And that makes all the difference, you know.
Do you tie yourself to one specific genre, or when you want to write down music, or you want to write music, you just keep your mind open to the experiences that's going to come to you, or the things that you've been influenced by?
I mean, I think, you know, this is an important or interesting question for me right now. I'm just last week released a new album.
Okay.
And
I'm going to put the link down below in the description. Make sure you go down in the description and click on it and have a listen to it.
Cool, thanks. I mean, so it'll be interesting if anyone does click the link and go have a look, because if you look on my Spotify profile, right, for instance, this album got math rock, it's got post rock, and then next to that it's got string quartet pieces and kind of Nils Fram inspired ambient pieces. It's a real mixture, this record. And if you go to the previous one, it's a classical record, and you go to the previous one to that, it's like this austere electroacoustic record. So, you know, all the different albums have kind of had a different focus, especially in recent years. And that's kind of tied to what we were chatting about earlier, where, okay, I figured out how to do that, and I'll move on and do the next thing. Not a great business proposal.
Okay.
You know, you got to be like, you know, I don't know what, Taylor Swift, and just churn out the same thing for like 20 years and make a back catalogue. But I mean, I'm not so worried about that. I'm worried about what I can't do. But this new record for me is interesting because it's like a melting pot of all the stuff put together. I've kind of found a way on this album to reconcile all these different threads. So the album sits as it's genre diverse, but it does work as a whole, you know, thing.
So if you wanna, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
So if you wanna describe yourself as an artist, and you wanna give yourself a title, so Jonathan, who produces or who is an artist, is a rock artist or rock /
So I mean, the you know, probably math and post rock. This record, it's not vocal based music, so it's not lyrics. It's instrumental music for sure.
Music, yeah.
But you know, the weird thing with the album is I played it to my PR person. He said it's prog rock. I played it to another person. They say it's math rock. The bassist will say there's a lot of jazz in it because there's improvisation. So it has a mix.
Of course.
But I do think that there's something. I mean, I was inspired, I guess, on this album because I think there's something happening in music at the moment. So if anyone's into classical music, you would have noted in the last 5 or 10 years, the big classical label Deutsche Grammophon has started doing these hybrid products. So you get the electronic artist Clark, from London. He did an album last year called Playground in a Lake, which is with the live show was at the London Contemporary Orchestra, but it's an orchestra, I think, in Bulgaria that they're recording. This is like classical chamber music with glitch electronics, So what is that? That's not been done before. And then Anna Meredith, who I mentioned earlier, she did a rearrangement of Vivaldi's Four Seasons for the Scottish National Ballet, I think. But her album won the Mercury Prize in 2019, and it's more of an electronica album. So there are artists that are now just one album is one thing, or one track is one thing, so it seems to have opened up a little bit.
Sure. I think in a way it's fascinating because to me music is like food. So just mixing different flavors and coming with this new taste.
Yeah.
That it's something different that nobody has tried. It's not necessarily bad or it's not necessarily good, but at the same time I think it's important as an artist to be able to define yourself in terms of marketing.
Yeah.
So when you want to market yourself, you gotta be able to just have some kind of definition. That's my perspective, at least.
I think I think so, but I'm not rebutting, but reflecting. The Anna Meredith, I went to her show as well at the Barbican earlier this year, and what struck me at the Barbican Concert Hall, traditionally a classical concert hall, but in this concert hall, they had the London Chamber Orchestra and her band, which is kind of like house music almost, or dance music. And I looked around at the audience and there was some people in their 70s and 80s. There were kids, my kids were there, There were people of my generation, I'm in my 40s, 30s, 20s, a real mix of people. So I think there are market categories of music that have distinct audience bands of certain generations, etc., etc. But there is another kind of space opening up for potentially genre diverse stuff, which I think is pretty interesting.
Do you feel that there is any kind of pressure from social media or music industry itself that an artist has to behave in a certain way or say certain things or wear certain things or anything in that sense?
I was watching a documentary on the 80s about Madonna's famous performance of Like a Virgin, which she did in the wedding dress.
Oh, I love the song.
Yeah, this iconic performance where she rolled around suggestively on stage and stuff, and it was like back then, there was this huge outrage. Heavens, what they think of Megan Thee Stallion or whatever, but back then. But anyway, it was this big event, and I reflected on that in the sense that there's something about provocativeness within pop music that's part of the nature of it. It's always been there. It's maybe it's the theatre of it. There's a theatre to pop performance, or like U2's Europa tour. Bono running around fly glasses and crazy things all back then. So there's something about the theatrical nature of pop music that I think is reflected in social media. So people behave on social media in ways that are maybe accepted to not necessarily represent their character. I read there was a biography written about the U2's Europa tour, and the one comment that always stuck with me is Bono's wife said his name's Paul Hewson, right? It takes him 3 months after the tour to stop being Bono and to become Paul again. So it's almost like method acting in a way, becoming the character. But I think the social media thing is different because there's this almost like a schizophrenia, psychosis going on, where people are having to be in one day, one thing for the one screen on Instagram, and then a different character on TikTok because you got to be whatever on TikTok, and then a different character. I think it's very challenging.
It is.
Whereas previously, you would method act into the character while on tour and maybe retreat and become who you are off stage. It's difficult.
I assume back in the days that musicians didn't really have to deal with all because the label would do that for you, and you could be the musician. But I think that would come with some other stuff aside, because as a label they would get a massive cut of what you were earning. And as a musician nowadays, you can just be an independent musician and get all the royalties and all the so-called income and revenue that you're going to make from your songs. But at the same time, it comes with the sacrifice that you're going to have to, for example, stay at home or don't go out or make videos or make TikTok videos or make Instagram reels with all those plavos to be able to promote yourself and market yourself.
But I mean, there's upsides and downsides. So people who are, like what you've just explained, and people are very somewhat optimistic is the word, or positive about the ability to somewhat control your own copyright and revenue, get your 0.006 cents from Spotify.
Oh yeah, that's
which is a staggeringly small amount of money.
100%. That's
there's something attractive about the idea of that. Maybe the reality is that
I think that came with the era that we had streaming, and there's nothing much we can do about it. I don't know, maybe there is. There's something we can do about it, but I assume that most of the money that artists are making nowadays is from live shows and concerts and stuff like that, and gigging, rather than streaming. Because even I think one of the top pays would be YouTube or Deezer. They're even like 0.0035 something. So it's not really that much.
No, it's not. And I mean, the other stat that's important, I mean, I think for people to understand is that, of streaming, of music that is streamed, it's more than 70% of it is old catalog. So catalog that predates streaming. And that, I mean, the hypothesis about that is that there's, 40,000 or so songs uploaded to Spotify every day. Right. So the point is, who's listening? Whereas in the previous days, people would say like the record companies were taking a massive cut, but they had A&R, artist and representation, who were gatekeepers to the industry. So like really good product in a way got through, but there was less product, but that meant that there was less choice for consumers. Therefore, many more consumers bought the same products. So in the end, the record companies got mega wealthy, but many artists did it well. So now you've got 40,000 songs a day. I couldn't even do the math on what that is per year. Sure, everyone's earning a pittance from streaming, but those 40,000 songs released today only constitute 30% of the total streams, less than 30% of the total streams that are going. Whereas the back catalogue is earning all the money, all the 0.035 cents. That's mostly going to back catalogue anyway. So the economics of it are not good. So if you read the IFPI report on the industry, they will say, music industry's back to pre-physical product levels. But who's seeing that? No one's seeing that. The physical product people, those ones that release, are the ones that are earning the most from streaming. So the system is a little bit broken.
It's definitely complicated, but as you said it as well, it's like a coin, always comes with two sides. So if you accept one, you have to accept the other as well.
You can't change it.
That's true.
Maybe you can. I mean, this MFT story, music fungible tokens, the blockchain stuff. That represents, I think, for me, something that's pretty interesting.
I've heard about it as well.
Yeah, it's just in its infancy, but that, because of the blockchain, that allows me to really control my own copyright, because
that's true.
I'm putting my stuff on Spotify, but I'm in control. Who's actually in control? No, Daniel Elk is in control of what's going on here. Not me. That's an illusion. But MFTs makes it real. I'm actually in control of that. So that represents something new and interesting. What it'll do over the next 5 or 10 years, I mean, that remains to be seen.
Do you feel that you've had to do any kind of sacrifices in your musical journey to be able to be the musician that you are right now, or do the things that you're doing right now?
Sacrifices? What do you mean by?
Obviously, sacrifice could mean something different for everyone. Sacrifice means that you wanted to do something else, but you had to do, for example, you had to stay at home and practice instead to be able to make it to the musician that you wanted to be.
Well,
I assume that if you have the love for it, it's not so much as a sacrifice.
I was saying to a colleague at the university the other day, because I find it's a real struggle to get people to practice, students to practice. So, both regularly and in terms of volume.
Why do you think is that?
I'm not sure. I think that I have theories, obviously, and two theories are, that the music industry itself is built on the idea that you don't have to practice. It's like this thing that just happens, Louis Cole just suddenly out of the blue is able to play giant steps at 300 BPM. It's like, it's like wow, and so everyone sells this idea, and I think that's good commerce in the sense that if I was to say to you, take my second point would be, if I was to say to you, as if I was Mr. Fender, hypothetically, and I'd say, here's a Fender Stratocaster. I'll put a billboard up on the highway to sell it, and I say, this is a Fender Stratocaster. You'll probably never get to play it well. It demands 20,000 hours. Look at about 6 to 8 hours of practice a day just to get to a basic level. Come buy it now. No one's going to buy a guitar, right? That's the truth. Sure. So I think there's something ingrained about this idea of suddenly you're a musician. I think it's gotten into the psyche. That's the one thing. I think there's also a lot of distractions. We talked a lot about social media. If you just see people just doom scrolling on their phone, they lose half a day,
Of course, 100%.
And in my day, when I was younger, and I don't want to sound like an old fart now, but anyway, but when I was young and studying music, people were fighting over practice rooms, literally. Like when I say fighting, like fighting over to get access to practice rooms. People were sleeping in practice rooms. People, and I know that, for instance, Berkeley has a reputation of that as well. So there are still people that want to practice, but there is this narrative of you don't really need to practice to make it.
And I think that some part of it, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
Some part of it goes back to the old, the cliche that how bad do you want it?
How bad do you want it?
How bad do you, I think if you want it bad enough,
yeah.
If you're not putting the effort into this to make it happen for yourself,
yeah,
you don't really want it that bad.
Well, yeah, but
that's my analogy. That's my analogy.
Yeah. I sound like I'm defending people who don't practice. I'm not. But I'm reflecting on it. And one of my students was asking about it because I was practicing this one short chord progression, and I just wasn't happy with the way the improvisation was coming out. And they said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I've spent 2 hours on this 16 bars now. I'm just going to spend another 2 hours on it and see. So there's not this idea that you'd spend 4 hours practicing 16 bars over and over and over and over. I don't think people are exposed to that. Students are exposed to that. So it's almost like they've never seen it. Like we were talking earlier about Jacob Collier or my kids, seeing practice in the house all the time. I think if you've seen that, you're like, oh, that's how it works. And then you can track how they got better. It's almost as if that's never been seen. So then maybe you'd sit down with a guitar or, at the piano or whatever, and now you've got to practice a C major scale. And you go on the internet, somebody goes, you think, okay, cool. And you're like just struggling. Eventually you give up, not realizing nobody's told you, okay, you need to practice that C major scale for like 20 weeks. Gradually moving up the tempo from here to here to here for half an hour a day, and then it'll come right. And then on top of that, you need to practice and sing the notes, know the pitch class, know the harmonic implications, know its relationship to other scales. The world unfolds then, but nobody's ever been exposed to that almost, and I think people give up.
I agree 100% in that sense that because of social media, the definition of a lot of things in life has changed for people. As you said, you see like this person playing piano or playing any other instrument or singing perfectly, and you see only 4 pictures of them.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, that's how it happens.
Yeah.
You just start singing and it's gonna happen for itself. But you don't really see that, like, what are the struggles that they went through, like, for the last 20 years to be able to sing even on pitch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I 100% agree. 100%
no, the bass player on this new record of mine, he's a South African guy. He's coming here to Liverpool next week. And I remember meeting him when I was younger, and he practiced, he was practicing 14 hours a day, right? When he was in his 20s. And he practiced so much that he got a carpal tunnel syndrome, and he had to have an operation to fix it. So what did he do? He just practiced the one hand then for like 14 hours, so the other one healed. You know what I mean? It's like,
Oh,
You know, he didn't stop.
that
He
means
pushed
you
it.
want it really bad.
You want it really bad. You have to be careful. And I knew a guy that did exactly that. He was practicing 14, 15 hours a day, and he stuffed up his one hand, the left hand of the guitar, you know. So the doctors told him he had to stop doing that. So what he did, he just turned the guitar around the other way and learned it the other way. So now he plays left-handed.
You'll come up with ideas if you really want it.
If you really want it, you know. But I guess if you've never seen results, or you've never seen in someone else the outcomes of those sorts of work, it's very hard to, you know, it's very hard to motivate yourself.
I think that's one of the things that I've learned myself from talking to other musicians. You have to reward yourself as well. You have to celebrate and reward yourself.
Yeah.
How big or how small the achievements are, you have to reward yourself so you just feel good about your progress. Otherwise, you're just chasing something and you're just gonna exhaust yourself.
Yeah.
After a while, I think that's a good technique to use. Maybe.
I think so, and it's also it's the type of reward is really important to understand. You know, for you know, young musicians particularly, is like, you know, all this stuff that's come out about Facebook, for instance, about the way they know how the app, they use the app to trigger the dopamine reward system, so you become addicted to that fix.
Sure, especially the numbers.
Yeah.
More views and
more
likes
views
and comments that you get, you think, oh my god, I'm making it.
Yeah,
or whatever.
And there's something in that reward structure which is deeply bad for the types of reward structures that come from like immersing yourself in study or practice or preparation or rehearsal or, you know, refinement of really small things. You know, Facebook gives you that immediate hit. I did something, I got likes, brilliant. So it was a short distance between the thing that you did and the reward that you got. Whereas music is exactly the opposite. It's a very, very long distance to that reward. But when you get through to that reward, that skill that is the reward will last you, if you prepare right, will last you for your lifetime. Whereas, who knows, your Facebook likes are gone by next week, you know?
There is a quote that actually works here in this instance, and it says, it becomes easier during the time, but it's never easy.
No.
You know, maybe like 100 years ago, learning guitar was harder compared to today. But it was definitely harder, let me just put it this way. But it's definitely going to be a lot of effort to be able to learn it. Back in the days, you didn't have the opportunity to have access to a tutor easily. But nowadays, you have online tutors, you have a lot of even tutors in your city that you can access and you can Google it and you can find it easily, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, important caveat to that is it shouldn't be easy.
Yeah, true.
If it is easy, you know, I would be worried, you know.
True.
If it's not difficult to achieve, you know, then you're actually working on something that you're really good at, which is a bit of a waste of time.
Let's say Jonathan wants to make music and he wants to collaborate with others. How do you find collaborators?
That's hard. I mean, I've been back in the UK now for 2 years, and you know, there's something telling in the fact that the band I'm playing with are in Johannesburg and Cape Town, you know. So that, I mean, I guess, you know, with those guys, I've been playing with them 15 years, 20 years. So there's something about an investment in a relationship, you know. You know, if you're married and you've invested really long in your wife and you know in your relationship together, there's certain things you have in that relationship which are irreplaceable. You know.
Actually, I want you to just dig deeper in that area of that relationship. How important it is to have that kind of a relationship and musicianship with your band or with the people that you know, to be able to create a song.
In my case, super important because my music has got improvisation in it. So the trio that I'm working with, the musicians, the drummer and I are very close friends, and I will look at him over the drum kit, just stare at his eyes while we're playing, and we'll finish the phrase together.
Wow.
And improvise. But it's because we know each other and kind of smile and have a wink. It's not formulated, but that's an energy and a beauty that's very difficult to build over a short time. The bassist is a generation above me, so we've got kind of 3 generations in the group. The bassist is a generation above me, but I studied with him, and he studied with the guy that taught there's an older guy that's now passed away that taught both of us actually.
Mm.
And so there's something about that guy that taught our guru that is in me and is in him, and I studied with him, and so there's a language there that is unique, you know. I think, you know, so in that type of music, it's really, really important. Music that's kind of dependent on the relationship, and to build those from scratch takes a lot of time. I think there are other musics that are not so reliant on that, you know. So if you became a famous pop singer and you needed to book a band, you'd book just the best players, because you don't really want to, you know, you don't want to become their best mate. You just want to know the guitar player is going to nail the parts every night. So I think it varies. You know, it varies from project to project. I used to work a lot with a classical guitarist. We had a duo, and that was fabulous. You know, we were really close friends, and when we played together, the audience knew it. They could pick it up, you know, and there's something beautiful in that emotion. So I think it changes and varies depending on the music that you're making.
Do you have a mentor, or did you have a mentor in your musical career, and do you think that's important?
Yeah, for sure. A number of mentors. I had, you know, when I was young, I had this guitar teacher I started out with, and so while I was in school, it was really important to have that relationship. I looked up to that person. When I got to university, I found it was classical guitar. I found this pianist. His name's Malcolm Ney. Amazing classical pianist, and he was able to do things musically that I wasn't finding in a guitarist. So I looked up to him, and I went to him after some convincing. I said to him, "Please teach me guitar." You know, he was teaching me music, so I really looked up to him, and we remained friends all these years. And then later, when I wanted to study jazz, I got with this guy who I mentioned, Johnny Faree. I didn't give his name, and I'd pay for an hour on a Friday, and I'd leave every week after 4. So he wouldn't let me. The lessons were 4 hours. I'd eventually say, "Please, can I go home?" So there was that guru relationship, which is incredibly important, you know. And I think even as a teacher, you know, in his case, he didn't want me to leave, and I didn't want to leave, and then the money doesn't matter, you know. So you have this affirming relationship between a teacher and a student. It's really, really useful. And you know, for instance, the bass player I mentioned, I really look up to him, and there's always learning, you know. So I think having a generation or two, a musician that you work with and consult, you can't buy that, you know.
True.
So to cycle back to your thing about learning on YouTube and stuff, it worries me, because you don't build that relationship, and you don't have that. There's something about that guru relationship, like I mentioned in India.
I think in my perspective, it's absolutely crucial to have a mentor.
Right.
It's absolutely crucial to have a mentor. Don't get me wrong, it's more accessible, be able to learn from so-called YouTube, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best way to learn.
No.
You know what I mean? So it's a good beginning, and it means that there is no excuse for me. If I want to learn, there is no excuse out there.
No.
Because I have accessibility. But obviously, if I want to make that investment into a tutor who's going to be able to teach me one-on-one, that so-called mentor, which is, in my perspective, again, is crucial.
Yeah.
Great. But if I don't want to do that, I still have the accessibility to be able to teach myself somehow, because I think music is music, meaning that you don't really have to know the theory side of it. We have a lot of guitarists who don't have any idea what note they're playing. We have a lot of piano players the same. They don't know what they're playing. They can't read sheet music, but they're amazing artists. Because I think music was there, and music theory came after it to enable me to understand what I'm doing better, be able to teach it to somebody else, and at the same time have it in my toolbox as a tool whenever I want to use it. But I don't really have to necessarily know music theory to be a musician, even greatest of all time. That's my perception of it anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to agree with you, as you gather.
That's fine. That's fine.
No, not. So I don't. Let me qualify this. I wouldn't, not in a punitive way, so not like you're naughty, you need to know your theory.
Yeah, sure.
I think like for me, like I wish I'd known more theory. So I came at this from the point of doing classical guitar, and back in those years when you played classical guitar, you just had the sheet music. You didn't know theory. You just were it's like tab, effectively. You just put your fingers where the dots are. So I didn't know what I was playing. I had no idea what it was. And I could play to a very, very high level. So I had a career. You're right. I had a career as a musician, playing concerts successfully with no theoretical knowledge. But the one thing that theory does, and I would say theory, theory for me is not paper-based theory. It's paper-based theory coupled with oral theories.
It's knowledge and a skill.
And a skill. So it's the Jacob Collier thing again. It's the same old story. But there's something about theory and ear that opens the world to you.
In that sense, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying you don't have to.
No.
But obviously, it's like common sense. If you have more knowledge, you have more power. Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, but I was going to say that theory for me is like a box of chocolates.
True.
It's just delicious.
That's true.
You don't know what's in there, but then once you open it, you get going. You're like, oh my gosh. I had a student today who's got to do a version of a film trailer, and she was showing me June. The Hans Zimmer's most recent June trailer, and I said, right, what we listened to it once. I said, great. What techniques is he using? She's like, what do you mean? I said, what's the techniques? She says, I don't know. I said, right, okay, this is a Ray's fourth harmonic minor scale, and he's doing this because of this and this and this, and this is connected to Eastern music in this way, and it's because it's exotic on a foreign planet, and the desert scene. Just having that immediacy to that, and then her face lit up. She's no one, I don't know this, and so it's like, that's what I say, it's like a box of chocolates. Suddenly, she's like, oh, okay,
makes sense. And
to write that type of trailer, I just need that information. That's it. So once you scratch at that box and you get attracted to it, it's addictive, but absolutely, many musicians have whole careers not knowing a harmonic minor scale with a raised fourth,
True.
But it can be exciting to know how it works.
So when you started your musical career back in the days, did you have plan B, or like being a musician was the only thing that you went for?
I had an interest in interior design. We've done some house renovations across the years, my wife and I.
Is that something like a side hustle that you were doing from even back in the days?
Yeah, it was, it predates the phrase side hustle, but, but it was just something we enjoyed doing, I always enjoyed drinking it. So, when I was thinking about studying, I very briefly thought about interior decoration, but the problem was I was already so highly leveraged into music by the time I finished school. By the time I got the equivalent of A levels, I was already there was so much investment, it kind of made sense to do it. That doesn't mean that there weren't points where I've gone like, what the flip? Like, why am I doing this? Like, it's really, really, really tough. Especially if your character is one that doesn't necessarily want to settle on repeating the same product over and over, if you don't have that in your nature.
Sure.
So there's times I would have thought like not to do it, but then just keep coming back because it just remains interesting.
So when you want to release a song, do you have a release strategy? Do you do anything to prepare your audience for the song? And what do you do? That's
also a complex question. So, years when I started out, before I was working in academia, so this would have been in 2000, and I released in 2001 and in 2005. Those were my first two, and that was the time where you got a record deal and you made a CD and you released the CD, and then the record company took care of all that, and you could focus on the concerts and the playing and the support of that. And then, so 2005 was the last kind of record deal I had, and then CD Baby popped up back then. And so the next two records I went with CD Baby, and for that I had connected with some musicians in Europe. So I had a half South African, half European band, and we would just tour and make a decent living out of selling discs, playing the concert, selling the discs at the concert, the physical stuff. But then in 2010, I'd been in academia for about 8 years. And the one thing as a career that probably most of your viewers won't know about is kind of academic career, which is you're working as a lecturer. And so you have lecturing duties and you have admin duties. But if you have a research contract, so I'm on research and teaching, you're supposed to explore things. And so for the last 10 years, up until this recent release, the last 10 years, each project was really an interrogation of a specific idea. Like, can we do this? Is this possible? So we do concerts and recordings around that. So to answer your question, really, there's not been a focus on preparing people really for releases until this recent one. Because the focus was the research question. And then what happens is sometimes you get funding for those projects, and so it becomes a self-sustaining thing. And you'll do research-based concerts and tours and things like that. So
do you think it's important to have a release strategy to release a song?
So I'm learning with this new album now that yes, it is. So we've had a release strategy, and I'm learning. I must say, I've really learned in the last 5 months a lot about that, and because the big thing that I've learned strategy-wise is that internet is resplendent with companies that are going to give you 20,000 Spotify streams in 1 week, and so you think, wow, that's enticing, and then you suddenly discover it's bot farms and so you got to have a strategy, because as I found out, with this new release, I was thinking about one of those, and still I started digging on the internet. I realized, wow, if I employ one of those bot farms as my strategy, I can get banned from Spotify for life, right?
Of course.
Which is crazy, you have to have a strategy. I think you need to do a lot of work trying to understand, which is very difficult, trying to understand how the internet is working. So at the moment, I've spent about 3 months working on Meta for Business on the platform and using ToneDen, which I find super effective.
What was it called?
ToneDen, ToneDen.
Okay.
ToneDen's fantastic.
What does it do?
So it allows you to. It's by the Eventbrite, the company Eventbrite.
Okay. Oh, Eventbrite. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's one of their products. What I've enjoyed with that is it allows you to run a Spotify-based advertising campaign where you can target sound-alikes. So my single Bounce is a math rock single, and there's certain math rock bands that are big, and the ToneDen allows you to target adverts to people all over the world that like those bands.
Wow.
And with kind of fringe genres like math rock, it's not a clustered audience, it's a globally distributed audience,
Wow.
So that's powerful in the sense that maybe there's 20 people in the Philippines that like this particular band. You can hit them through ToneDen. So I think having a release strategy is really about really thinking about, in this case, your product right down to the nuance, researching the audience base and the people that are there, and then using tools like this to be able to target those audience. Otherwise, you're just one of 40,000 releases a day and you'll disappear. So that's what I've been doing at the moment, and I'm sure it's different for everyone else.
And you find that like a genuine and legit way of doing, like gaining a lot of so-called listeners or target audience.
So that's been like interesting in the sense that what I learned about the bot farms is your listening will go up and then just shoots down again, and because it's just a farmed listen.
It's just a number that doesn't really mean anything.
And Spotify,
they're not even humans.
No, they're not. And Spotify are wise to this, and so they, there's literally that threat you'll get kicked off. You've seen artists get kicked off, but on top of that, it doesn't drive engagement. At the end of the day, you can get your dopamine fix like in Facebook from a spike in your Spotify numbers, or you can try and reach people, especially if you're in a niche genre, So that's the strategy for this. I also think like younger bands, obviously you're going to play the circuit. So in Liverpool, you'll play all the venues and build a following. In my case, I'm not young and I've got a full-time job, and so I'm trying to build an audience because I know that there are circuits for this type of improvised music that we can plug into. So that's the strategy at the moment for this.
I'm just gonna put the link down below so you can go check it out yourself as well, guys. What are some challenges that you've faced in your musical career from the time that you started to the time being?
Yeah, you mentioned I don't think we ever actually properly answered the sacrifices question, but that ties into this in a way.
Sure.
Honestly, like, we all, it's in our nature. Well, it's in my nature, and I presume a lot of other people, but like, we run away from the things that either we feel we can't do, or the things that the things that we know we need to do, and so we pretend that we don't need to do them, and so the challenges in my career is that I found sometimes I should have gotten going with certain things a little bit earlier, or embraced certain ideas or needs or processes a little bit earlier. That was one thing. The other biggest challenge, I would say, is choosing your colleagues wisely. Okay.
Colleagues in terms of
musicians you work with.
Musicians you work with. Okay.
I made 2 or 3 bad decisions, and I wish I could unwind that. You lose time.
Of course.
And you don't really have time.
It's the most precious thing in the world.
Yeah.
Obviously, when we're younger, we don't really care about it that much because we just see that we have a lot of it. But I think, it's the most important thing in life, I think.
Yeah, in those times, like you said, when you're younger, you think you've got a lot of time. Youth is wasted on the young. It sounds like we sound like 2 old men suddenly on the porch complaining about the youth, but we're not. What we're doing is reflecting on our own lives and saying, I wish I'd have, just put the energy in earlier. The other thing is, but then what about neuroplasticity is, when you're younger, your brain is able to absorb things quicker. I find it's just harder. I'm not talking like technophobia or something. It's just practicing scales. It takes long.
It doesn't come as easy. I agree 100%. It's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just life of a human being, and it's just part of being a human. But I think when you are aware of what's going to happen in the future, as you said, you would be able to tackle them ahead of time.
Yeah, that's the challenge. It's like the challenge is, say for those relationships that I spoke of, they're gratifying at the moment, and you think it's important, and the challenge is then like when you realize that it's not important or there's something dodge about it. The challenge is nipping it quickly. Get on with the next thing and move. Finding your self-worth without that situation. And knowing yourself. That's one of the biggest challenges. Like knowing and accepting yourself. What I shared earlier about my new work being a whole bunch of genres inside one thing. I should have accepted that 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I should have just... So the challenge was I was doing things that I thought I was supposed to do, or I thought one was supposed to do, or I thought the industry or other people were telling me to do. The challenge is like knowing that, okay, this is who I am. This is the music that I make, and if you don't like it, that's fine. I'm going to try and do it with the highest level of integrity, and I've only gotten better at that in very recent years. So the challenge is trying to make up for lost time, I suppose.
Do you believe in talent? Do you think it's in our gene, or do you think it's purely work ethic? I think it's purely work ethic. I don't really believe in talent.
Oh, good. Well, then we're fine. That's a short conversation then. I think, I quit using the term about 20 years ago. So I think it's a very bad term.
Talent.
Yeah. Like you're talented for music. Like, what does that even mean? Lots of people are supposedly talented for music, but then there's just hours.
Put in the of course.
You put in the hours and it comes and. But to cycle back to our early conversation, it's what you put the hours into. There's
of course
many facets to music, so you need to, do do the practical part, do the listening part, do the analysis part, understand the history, do the oral training, do the theory if you want to do that. If you're going to go into audio engineering, know the science as well as the engineering, and don't just buy FL Studio and make beats, but then also immerse yourself in lots of musical cultures. And then if talent was a real thing, it's what happens when you put all of those things in a box, cool things grow. It's such a strange thing in the arts that we use that word, because you never say to a young person, like, you have a talent for surgery, and give them a knife.
Yeah, true.
And
True.
You're probably going, what the flip? But we'd never say that.
True.
There's something about becoming a surgeon. You might then later say this person's a very talented surgeon. They exhibit, incredible skill. That's a different meaning of the word. But like music, this word talent presumes something that is there that doesn't require the work to. So I think it undermines the need to practice.
No, I agree 100%. For some people, as we said before, for some people comes more naturally in comparison. It's because they had potential. They had potential because they had privileges.
Yeah.
Down the line, maybe they had the opportunity to be surrounded by a musical family.
Yeah.
So like, the father was a piano player. The piano was being played all the time. The mother was a singer, you know what I mean? So you would have the privilege to be in that musical environment. So you would blossom, naturally. So it comes to you more naturally, comparing to the person who had to, for example, start when they were 15.
Yeah.
Working on the musical career 5-10 hours a day, you know what I mean? So obviously, I agree 100%.
Yeah, it's what you're exposed to. My mother-in-law is a great ceramic artist, and she obviously draws all her work before she renders it into clay.
Mm-hmm.
And then my brother-in-law is a great musician and also an artist. He's a guitarist as well, and an artist. And my sister-in-law is an animator and artist. And I've got two sons. My younger one is drawing a lot. He's getting better all the time. But the truth is, when he was like 4, 5, and 6, every time he'd go to his granny's house on the weekend, we'd come into the room and she'd put paper out and put all the charcoal and pens out, and they would sit and draw the whole day. So he's been doing it. He's been exposed to it, and now it's just natural, So, maybe the word talent means somebody who just goes for something because they've enjoyed it, and then is naturally willing to spend those extra hours.
True.
It's a better meaning,
Very true. We'll be back. So tell me, do you think there is anything wrong with music industry that you wish it was in another way?
I mean, there's the music making process.
Mm-hmm.
The joy of making stuff and communicating, and that's just for me continually exciting and wonderful. I mean, I went to colleagues at the university have this doom metal band,
Mm-hmm.
that I went to see last Friday, and it was just wonderful. There was only a small audience of about 100. It was in the world, across in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just fabulous. And I had a sore jaw afterwards. I mean, it's like the performance was so outrageous, and and just left me really, really happy. Is that going to make money? No. So therein lies the answer to your question, because in the question, is there something wrong with the music industry? Well, the music industry is an industry. It's designed to make money. But does that prohibit people from making interesting and cool music just for the pure pleasure of making music? No, people still do that. And that goes all the way back, to in Western music, right through the Baroque period or the pre-Baroque and the medieval. People were making music for different reasons. There was church music, there was liturgical music, there's, and there's music connected to religions all over the world, even, from, your side of the world, really, And so, but the music itself almost exists outside of the system in which it's embedded. So musics have a relationship to various systems through history, but the music itself is something else, in my mind at least, because people still make music just for the sake of making music. is there something wrong with industry? Well, that's a bigger question, because you take away the word music and you say, well, is capitalism pretty rotten at the moment? Yeah, the climate is collapsing, people are starving. I was listening to a program on the way here about the migrants coming across the channel and dying, and there's stuff that's really, really wrong with industry, and industry has been a sub-word of capitalism. There are problems. So to me, the two words together are not innocuous. They're like
some kind of conflict.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just obtuse answer. Sorry.
Interesting. No, that's interesting. That's actually very interesting. What do you think are the 3 elements of success in music industry?
I have no idea whatsoever. So that's why I'll never have a popular YouTube channel. Because YouTube channel is always like, I'm going to tell you exactly what 3 things you need to do to be successful in the music industry.
I agree 100% because it's never going to be 3 elements.
Yeah.
But it's just obviously an example of these are the 3 things that if you don't have them, it's hard to make it. These are the very basic of being able to make it. For example, if you're not consistent, that's one of the things. If you're not consistent, you wouldn't be able to make it in any industry, never mind about music industry.
I think musical ability in its multifacets are like, if you're an instrumentalist, you've got to be great. You can't be average. Because you just get swallowed. So you got to be great. That's the one thing.
Sure.
The second thing for me is your oral skill is the most neglected thing in the world. And that is the one. All the great musicians I've ever worked with, all the musicians that we were talking about earlier, it's oral skill. It's the ability to hear something, immediately play it, identify it, write it out, arrange it, whatever it is. But that's dependent on the ear.
Trained ears, yeah, sure.
So you should be working on your ear as much as you're working on your voice or on your instrument or your songwriting. And you got to be able to do that. You got to spend time on that.
I agree 100%.
And those 2 things are important for me. But the third thing is that I would say is that to be successful in the music industry, that question means that you need to know what that word success means for you. So
100%.
Does success mean a record deal?
Money or
a lot of money,
of course.
A crazy TikTok account, or
of course,
gold teeth or something terrible like that. Or does it mean?
I agree.
Or does it mean that I'm happy?
I agree.
And I've only found this recently. Like being happy,
of course,
playing the music that I'm playing and being I feel successful. Okay. Does it mean somebody has my poster on their wall? No, but that's never been part of my idea of success. It's just being able to share music with people and make music that I'm interested in. Yeah, so...
If you weren't a musician, who would you be?
I mean, am I just a musician? No, I'm also a teacher, and I really... I'm not teaching to make money. I love teaching. I get a huge kick out of seeing students flourish, so I still have contact with students from 10, 15 years ago, and some of them become colleagues, So I am a teacher as well as a musician. I teach music, but I get more of a kick out of helping. So maybe a teacher. So
do you do anything to look after your mental and physical body?
Yeah, I run a lot and do gym Do you think that's important? Yeah. I think it's very important, and also we as a family we don't eat any junk food and we try and stay away from that stuff. Yeah,
very important.
It's very
you are what you eat. There is a very famous saying.
Yeah, I think that's really important. To keep your stress levels down. And also with to be a musician you have to be sharp all the time. It's a tricky. You have to be on the game. You can't have an off night, so...
Sure. Like, obviously, as a human being, we go through oceans of emotions, right? What do you do when you feel depressed or you feel anxiety? How do you get rid of them? How do you deal with them?
Particular time in my life when things weren't going well, and I did go through that, and I found the thing that eventually got me out of it was exercise. I'd been in a long cycle of overworking, just working like crazy for years, you know, and I got sick effectively from it. So I think there's you know, there are times you have to accept there's times in one's life when you will go through that, you know. I think
I think exercise really helped.
Exercise really helps, and I think also I think there is a culture, you know, we see it in, say, America or wherever, where there's a culture of over medicating, and I think that's just a dangerous thing, you know. That I think general health is really, really important, and you know, being not just being you know, the stereotypical visual fit, like being healthy,
sure,
you know, is really important if you want to
not
try
being healthy in a picture. Actually being
healthy are two separate things.
Yeah, of course.
You know, not an airbrushed magazine picture.
100%.
No, like really, like just healthy, you know. And
I agree. Yeah.
It's tough, you know, because things are made for convenience. You know, we were talking at the start about the difficulties with practicing. We're sold this idea of convenience. So food is convenient, but generally the food that's convenient is garbage, you know. And so people will go there, and then you wind up with all sorts of complications. Then you don't feel like exercising because you're exhausted from the bad food and the sugar. And
as you said before, it's the definition of those things as well. You know, food in a lot of cultures is used as a medicine. So you feed the body to have a healthy body, not just to fill your stomach necessarily, you know.
Yeah, and that's, you know, to come back to your question about, you know, the music industries, you know, is there something wrong with the music industries? Yeah, there's something wrong with capitalism, because it's also warped that, you know, and it's Western society has all these current health problems because food is no longer either a source of nourishment or like you've explained, like a medicinal quality, or importantly, like a way to bring people, family around the table together around a meal and commune with each other. It's now just become an element of capitalism. So I'll sell you this thing as quickly as possible, get it, and you load it with sugar. You'll have a sugar high, deflate, and you'll come back for more. So, you know, that's the same thing with music. It's this fix of music, fix of food. We're on to economics.
I agree. So in this part, usually I ask our guests to make a prediction. We're coming from a place that we had vinyls and cassettes. We are in an era that we're listening to music online, which is streaming. So do you think there is a next level to music consumption? And how do you think we're going to consume music in the next decades?
Yeah, we mentioned earlier, I mentioned like, you know, blockchain and NFT, you know, MFT. There's something about that's interesting because it builds a relationship. So you write a song with this idea, and then I have I own a bit part of that song, you know, because copyright is not working really well, you know.
Sure.
Everyone's got the copyright back, and Daniel Alt takes the money, so we know that.
Sure.
But, you know, the MFT thing is interesting. What will become of that is unclear. The Bandcamp model was really, really interesting, and you know, before they sold it, it was kind of really a special place where people, and still sells all the time. My stuff's on Bandcamp as well, and that's great because the fans feel a genuine, you know, relationship to music. They overpay, you know, people overpay for the record. My new albums, I've printed vinyl, and that's really interesting because, you know, they just arrived this week and I put it on, and it has a different quality, it has a nostalgia. So that's exciting, the kind of growth of vinyl. It's one of the strongest growth areas. We could never have predicted that. Who would have thought that, you know, 5 years ago? Streaming was taking over, and now all of a sudden everyone's selling vinyls at £30 a piece. It's insanely expensive.
It's very tough to like say what's going to happen.
No, I mean, you could never have predicted when everything's for free on my phone, right? And yet I still go down to the record store and buy Clark and vinyl because I want to feel it.
Feel the actual product, yeah, sure.
So I think we are at a transitional phase. Where that's going, who knows?
It's tough to say.
It's tough to say. The majors are buying up everything because I guess maybe there's anxiety about what's going to happen next. But one can hope that through all of this, music will, you know, maybe have smaller, more nuclear relationships with smaller groups of fans or localities, or, you know, like New York was a great city for jazz and bebop revolution in the 50s, and the West Coast sound of Stan Getz, that jazz, and then the punk scene arrived in England. There were these kind of city-based localities, and that disappeared from about 97 through to now recently. Maybe there's something will come up again with this more localized sounds. I don't know.
3 things that you appreciate in your life and you're thankful of having them in your life.
Well, it's pretty easy. So I'm extremely grateful for my wife and my family. We're very, very close, and my wife also studied music. She's in radio.
Mm-hmm.
We met at undergraduate. She was a pianist, and so I'm very thankful for that relationship, because I wouldn't want to live with me or with a non-musician that trying to explain stuff.
Sure,
and then
sure.
Included in that are my kids. I'm extremely thankful for my kids. I've a wonderful, very close family, and I'm grateful for every moment with them. It seems corny, but I'm really thankful for the job I have currently.
Sure.
I had some very challenging jobs in the past, and this particular position at the University of Liverpool, the department is really warm, healthy, the fabulous colleagues. There's just can't wait to get to work. That's wonderful and thankful.
That's really good.
And then the third thing, I'm thankful for my faith. I went through a period in my life where I wasn't so focused on my faith, but I've come out of that, and I'm very grateful to be to have that in my life. I see it as providing a centrality that I wouldn't want to do without.
Dr. Jonathan Crossley, last words.
My takeaway would be, if you're wanting to be a musician, don't give up. Find the things that you suck at and spend all your time at that. That's one of the biggest lessons I ever learned. So that would be a takeaway. And also pursue what you want. I would love more people to hear my music, but not for any financial. I just want to share it with people.
Of course.
So pursue that as much as you can.
That's what we do at the end of the podcast.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thanks
Thank you for your time.
much for coming, everybody. I'm gonna put all the links to his social media down in the description, and I'm gonna put all the links to his music down in the description as well. Make sure you go give him a follow, listen to his music, and follow us for some more. Thanks very much.
Thank you, man. That was
Thank
fun.
you.
That was a lot of fun.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Thanks very much.